It was a crisp autumn evening, the golden hues of the setting sun casting long shadows on the streets of New York City. The bustling metropolis had settled into its usual rhythm, with people making their way to various events, huddled in warm coats as the temperatures began to dip. The air was thick with anticipation for the charity gala that had been widely talked about. It wasn't just another high society event. This one had Taylor Swift's name attached to it. Taylor, who had earned the reputation of being one of the most influential figures in the music industry, was set to attend. This wasn't just an ordinary night. It was one where all eyes were on her. Taylor's arrival at the gala was nothing short of spectacular. The crowd erupted into cheers as she stepped onto the red carpet, her radiant presence a stark contrast to the cold evening. She wore an elegant, floor-length gown that shimmered under the lights, and her signature blonde locks cascaded over her shoulders in waves. The cameras clicked incessantly, capturing every moment, every movement as she made her way inside the venue. As always, she was the center of attention. However, within the glittering chaos of the gala, something unusual was happening. Across the room, a young man stood, his sharp features almost blending into the shadows. His name was Adam Sinclair, a rising star in the music world who had recently gained attention for his controversial remarks in interviews. Despite being a newcomer, Adam had quickly built a reputation for being bold and outspoken. His opinions about the entertainment industry were often divisive, yet it was this very nature that made him intriguing to those who followed the latest buzz. On that particular evening, Adam was standing near the drinks table, his gaze fixated on Taylor, who was deep in conversation with a group of well-known producers. Adam wasn't known for backing down from a challenge, and he saw this as an opportunity, a chance to get closer to the superstar and perhaps make an impression. He, who knew that a casual meeting with Taylor Swift could open doors that would otherwise remain closed. But he wasn't just interested in her fame. There was something else in the way she carried herself that intrigued him. As the evening progressed, Adam noticed an opening. Taylor had momentarily broken away from the crowd to step outside onto the terrace, likely to catch a breath of fresh air. Her moment of solitude did not go unnoticed. Adam, sensing an opportunity, casually made his way toward the door. He wasn't trying to rush things, but rather, he wanted to approach her in a way that felt organic, as though it was fate bringing them together. He stepped outside and found her standing by the railing, staring out over the skyline of the city. There was something about her posture that struck him. She looked both poised and vulnerable, like someone who had mastered the art of hiding her true emotions behind a polished facade. Adam hesitated for a moment. He had always been bold, but approaching someone like Taylor Swift felt different. It wasn't just about making a name for himself. There was an underlying tension in the air, a sense that something was on the brink of unfolding. "Taylor," Adam finally said, his voice cutting through the quiet evening air. "I hope I'm not interrupting." She turned slightly, acknowledging his presence with a soft smile. "Not at all," she replied, her voice as calm and collected as ever. "It's a beautiful night, isn't it?" They exchanged pleasantries, for a moment discussing the view and the event, but Adam was already aware of the direction he wanted the conversation to take. He didn't want to linger in the realm of small talk. Instead, he wanted to challenge her. He wanted to understand what made her tick beyond the glittering persona. "You know," Adam began, his tone casual but carrying an edge of curiosity. "I've always wondered, how do you navigate all the pressures of fame? Does it ever get to you?" Taylor's smile faltered for just a moment. It was subtle, but it was there. She wasn't used to being asked such direct questions, especially in a setting like this. However, she recovered quickly, maintaining her trademark composure. "I've been doing this for a long time," she replied, her voice steady. "It becomes second nature after a while." But Adam wasn't satisfied with that response. He pressed further, leaning in slightly as he spoke. "But isn't there a point where it becomes too much? When the weight of it all, the expectations, the scrutiny, it's just too much to bear." Taylor's eyes narrowed just a fraction. It was clear that Adam's words had struck a chord. She didn't respond immediately, choosing instead to look out at the city below them, as if gathering her thoughts. The wind tugged gently at her hair, and for a split second, she looked tired. The facade she so often wore seemed to crack just enough for Adam to notice. For Adam, this moment felt like a breakthrough. He wasn't sure what he expected, but the fact that Taylor had been momentarily thrown off her usual polished exterior only made him more intrigued. "I don't let it," Taylor finally responded, her voice softer now. "It's not about the fame, it's about the music, the message, the people I care about. That's what keeps me grounded." Adam nodded, but he didn't let the conversation end there. "And what happens when the people you care about are the ones who end up causing the most stress?" he asked, his eyes locking with hers. "When the very people you trust can't give you the support you need." There was a long pause, and Taylor's expression shifted slightly. It was almost as though Adam had hit a nerve, though she quickly masked it. She took a deep breath and then spoke again, her tone now firm. "I don't have time for people who bring negativity into my life. I've learned to cut those out." But Adam could tell that this wasn't just a simple matter of cutting out negativity. There was more to the story. He sensed that there were layers to Taylor that the public would never see, layers that she was unwilling to expose. He wondered if this was the real Taylor, the one who wasn't performing for the cameras or for the millions of fans watching from afar. As the conversation continued, the atmosphere between them began to shift. The subtle tension that had once been present began to grow, though neither of them would acknowledge it openly. There was something undeniable about the connection, a quiet understanding that neither of them had expected. Adam had come into this meeting looking for an opportunity, but what he hadn't anticipated was the vulnerability that Taylor, so carefully guarded, had allowed him to witness. And then, without warning, the conversation took a turn. Adam, who had been probing for answers, shifted his tone. There was no longer a facade of politeness or pleasantries. It was just two people talking. No cameras, no reporters, no publicist standing nearby. The world outside seemed to fade away. As they stood there in the quiet night, facing one another, the tension between them was palpable, and for the first time, Adam saw Taylor in a light that few had ever seen her before. He could feel it, the change in her energy. The cool, confident Taylor Swift, the one everyone knew and adored, had for a brief moment become something more. What had started as a simple encounter had now evolved into something deeper, something more intimate. And as he stood there, Adam couldn't help but wonder, what would happen next? Would this moment be just a fleeting interaction, or would it be the catalyst for something more? As the night continued, the gala's ambiance remained vibrant with chatter and laughter, yet a noticeable shift had occurred. Though Taylor and Adam's conversation had remained calm, beneath the surface, an invisible current of tension had begun to ripple through the atmosphere. Neither of them fully acknowledged it at the time, but the encounter had set something in motion, something that neither was prepared for. The following day, the internet was abuzz. The subtle moment between Taylor and Adam had not gone unnoticed. The cameras had, of course, captured every fleeting expression and movement, and fans, as always, had been quick to dissect the interaction. It didn't take long for the social media landscape to flood with speculations. On Twitter, rumors swirled about the true nature of their conversation. Fans and casual observers alike pored over the video footage from the gala, looking for signs of tension, discomfort, or a deeper connection. Adam's words, in particular, were a topic of heated debate. Although he hadn't explicitly said anything controversial in the moment, it was the way he asked his questions, his probing, almost invasive line of inquiry, that stood out. His directness, which Taylor had maintained composure through, had been starkly different from what people had expected. The simple act of him questioning Taylor about her struggles with fame and personal relationships had caused many to wonder if there was more to the story. Did he know something that the public didn't? Was he trying to expose vulnerabilities that Taylor had worked so hard to keep hidden? While some fans tried to rationalize the encounter, thinking that it was simply a candid conversation between Two people in the industry, many others weren't as forgiving. A segment of the fan base, those who had been following Taylor for years, felt betrayed. The woman they had adored for so long seemed in that brief moment almost vulnerable, something they hadn't expected from their idol. It wasn't just about the conversation itself, it was about what it symbolized. For the first time, they saw Taylor Swift not as an untouchable pop icon, but as a human being grappling with the same challenges that many of them did, and that made them uneasy. As these thoughts spread, Taylor's team swiftly moved into damage control mode. Publicists, agents, and managers began working behind the scenes to craft a narrative that would alleviate the growing anxiety among fans. A statement was quickly released, attempting to clarify the situation. In the official response, Taylor's spokesperson emphasized that there was no drama between her and Adam Sinclair, that their conversation had simply been a discussion between two people in the industry. The aim was to downplay the moment and refocus the conversation on the positive aspects of the event. However, despite the attempt to quell the growing fire, the damage was done. The statement only served to deepen the mystery, leaving many to wonder why Taylor had chosen to remain so cryptic about the encounter. Fans who had been hoping for clarity were left feeling more confused than ever. Taylor's usual transparency had been replaced with a vague response, one that left them wanting more. They wanted the details. What had truly happened in that conversation? Why had she looked so uneasy, and why had Adam seemed so persistent in his questioning? Meanwhile, Adam Sinclair, ever the provocateur, seemed to revel in the attention. Instead of laying low, he leaned into the media storm. His social media posts became increasingly pointed and bold. He tweeted cryptic messages that only fueled the fire. Some were veiled references to the conversation he'd had with Taylor, while others hinted at deeper industry secrets that he had knowledge of. His public persona, always one to toe the line between controversy and fame, had now fully embraced the chaos that followed his interaction with Taylor. The next few days saw Adam giving interviews to several online outlets, where he spoke candidly about the pressure that celebrities like Taylor were under. He suggested that the public rarely saw the real Taylor Swift, and he insinuated that there was more to her struggles than what had been presented to the world. The way he spoke about her, with a mixture of admiration and challenge, left people wondering what had truly passed between them. He didn't provide specifics, but his comments were enough to keep the rumors alive and swirling. The public was hungry for answers, but neither Taylor nor Adam was giving them a clear picture. As the days wore on, more and more fans started to question the situation, asking themselves whether Taylor was still in control of her own narrative. There were growing whispers that someone was trying to undermine her, someone who had their own agenda, but who and why? As the speculation grew, so did the divide among Taylor's fan base. The once united front of her supporters began to fracture. Some stood by her, believing her to be the strong, independent woman they had always admired. They dismissed Adam's words as a desperate attempt for attention. To them, the conversation was simply a private moment between two people who had known each other for years. There was nothing to read into, they claimed, and they refused to entertain any negativity about their idol. But there was another faction of her fans, those who were disillusioned by the lack of transparency. They began to voice their concerns, more loudly, questioning the authenticity of Taylor's response to the incident. They didn't buy the vague statements from her team. To them, it felt like she was hiding something significant that she didn't want the public to know. The idea that Taylor could be manipulated or misled by someone like Adam Sinclair felt like a betrayal to them. How could she, the strong and independent woman they had followed for years, fall into the trap of being involved in something that seemed so murky and untrustworthy? The division grew more apparent with every passing day. On social media, comments on Taylor's posts became increasingly polarized. On one hand, there were messages of support, urging her to stay strong. On the other, there were fans demanding answers. Some even went so far as to accuse her of being complicit in a larger scheme, one that might involve Adam Sinclair and others in the industry. But even as the controversy raged on, Taylor remained largely silent. Aside from the initial statement, from her team she refrained from addressing the situation directly. She didn't post any personal reflections, nor did she try to set the record straight. It was as if she had retreated into herself, her usually active presence on social media now muted and distant. To some, this felt like a sign of weakness. To others, it seemed like a strategic retreat, a way for Taylor to avoid further conflict and let the storm pass. But regardless of the reasoning, the silence only served to deepen the mystery. Amid the growing tension, Adam continued to stir the pot. His behavior seemed to shift from that of a concerned industry peer to a more aggressive figure. He began to publicly question Taylor's actions and motives, suggesting that she had made herself vulnerable by letting the conversation get personal. "I don't know why people think Taylor is untouchable," he said in one of his interviews. "Everyone has a breaking point. Maybe she's just waiting for someone to be real with her." His words were sharp, and they felt like a challenge to the carefully constructed image of Taylor Swift that fans had come to love. As Adam's media presence continued to grow, it became increasingly clear that he was not going to back down. He wasn't interested in protecting anyone's reputation, least of all Taylor's. To him, this was about revealing the truth, whatever that truth might be. And with each new interview and tweet, Adam pulled further away from the role of an innocent bystander. He was no longer just a rising star. He had become a central figure in this drama, one whose intentions remained unclear. Taylor's fans, now more than ever, found themselves caught in the whirlwind of uncertainty. The more they tried to piece together the truth, the more they felt as though they were missing crucial pieces of the puzzle. Was Taylor really as strong and in control as she had always appeared to be? Or had Adam Sinclair, with his provocative questions and his growing influence, somehow disrupted the carefully balanced world that Taylor had spent so many years building? In the end, the questions remained unanswered. Taylor's silence was deafening, and Adam's words only added to the mystery. The tension that had begun as a simple encounter between two figures in the music world had now escalated into something much larger, a battle for control over the narrative, a fight that neither was willing to lose. The world watched, waiting for the next move in this unfolding drama. But for now, the answers were still elusive, hidden behind layers of speculation and half-truths. As the days stretched into a week, the public discourse surrounding Taylor Swift's interaction with Adam Sinclair intensified. The media buzz showed no signs of slowing down. Articles were written, fans were arguing, and the online world was ablaze with differing opinions. There was no shortage of speculation. The controversy had evolved into something far bigger than just a brief conversation between two celebrities at a gala. It had become a battleground for control over Taylor's narrative and reputation, and everyone seemed to be choosing sides. Adam Sinclair's public persona was transforming with every passing hour. The more the public's attention grew, the more his behavior changed. Initially, he had been cautious with his words, trying to strike a delicate balance between courting fame and maintaining professionalism. But as the media spotlight increased, Adam began to lean into his newfound role as a provocateur. His social media platforms became a series of calculated moves, each post more cryptic and daring than the last. He wanted to be seen, and more. Importantly, he wanted his narrative to be the one that mattered. The comments he made after the event, the ones that had been seemingly innocent at first, now began to take on a much darker tone. He posted images that seemed to point to his escalating involvement in the drama. In one photo, he captioned a picture of a sunset, writing, "Sometimes the truth only comes out when the light hits the right angle." For those who had been following the story closely, it was clear that he was referring to the events surrounding his conversation with Taylor. Adam was making it known that he wasn't done with the narrative, that he had more to say, and he would continue to keep people guessing. Taylor's team, meanwhile, scrambled to maintain the integrity of her public image. They could no longer afford to be passive about the situation. Every comment, every word from Adam Sinclair felt like an attack, a deliberate attempt to destabilize the carefully crafted image of Taylor that had been built over the years. In response, her team worked behind the scenes to craft another statement. But this time it wasn't just a simple clarification. It was a full-blown defense of Taylor's character. The message was clear. Taylor was not weak, she was not vulnerable, and she would not let anyone dictate her story. But when the statement was released, it was met with an overwhelming backlash. Fans who had once believed in Taylor's transparency now felt betrayed. The carefully worded response, while meant to soothe the public, only served to heighten their doubts. The statement felt distant, too polished, as though Taylor herself wasn't behind it. It lacked the sincerity that many had come to expect from her. The fans who had once been unwavering in their support now felt the stirrings of doubt. They began to question whether Taylor had truly been authentic, or whether the entire situation had been scripted, planned, or worse, manipulated. The pressure was mounting, and Taylor herself was beginning to show the strain. No longer seen as the woman who could easily navigate the highs and lows of her career, she was now being viewed as someone who was increasingly trapped in a web of her own making. The more her team tried to control the narrative, the more it slipped away from them. Taylor's carefully constructed public persona, the one that had made her one of the most admired figures in the world, was beginning to crack. At the same time, Adam's behavior was escalating. He knew he had the public's attention, and he wasn't about to let go of it. He made it clear that he wasn't just trying to create buzz for the sake of it. He had a point to make. Every word, every post, seemed designed to further unsettle Taylor and her fans. He even went so far as to post an old photo of the two of them from a previous event, with a caption that read, "Funny how we never really know who we're dealing with, huh?" It was a chilling reminder that Adam had history with Taylor, and he wasn't afraid to use it. Despite all the noise, Taylor chose to remain largely silent. For someone who had built a career on storytelling, on sharing her life and emotions, with her fans, her sudden withdrawal felt like a betrayal to some. They had followed her through every heartbreak, every triumph, every personal struggle, and now, in this moment of crisis, she had closed off. It was a silence that sent shockwaves through her fanbase. Some interpreted it as a sign of weakness, while others began to wonder if it was a calculated move, a way for her to regain control over a situation that was spiraling out of her grasp. But there were also those who rallied behind her. They refused to believe that Taylor could be so easily manipulated or influenced by someone like Adam Sinclair. These fans formed an even tighter bond with their idol, defending her at every turn. They claimed that the media was blowing things out of proportion, that Adam was simply trying to manipulate the situation for his own gain. To them, Taylor was still the strong, independent woman who had built a career on her own terms. They stood by her, even as the public scrutiny continued to intensify. As the debate raged on, a new twist in the saga began to emerge. Adam, ever the instigator, began to share more personal details about his relationship with Taylor. He posted a private conversation they had shared months earlier, long before the gala. The conversation, innocuous on its own, seemed to cast doubt on the nature of their friendship. Adam had made a comment about the pressure Taylor was under, in the public eye, to which she had responded with a hint of cynicism about the industry. To Adam, the exchange was revealing. It showed that Taylor wasn't as untouchable as everyone thought. Taylor's fans, who had once seen her as an almost mythical figure, now started to see her as something more human, more flawed. It was a difficult transition for many. Taylor had always been the voice of strength, the woman who could overcome anything. But now the cracks in her armor were becoming impossible to ignore. Fans who had once turned to her for solace now found themselves questioning the very foundation of her public persona. The fallout wasn't just limited to fans, however. The media picked up on the growing tension, and soon the conversation shifted from speculation about Taylor's personal life to outright debates about her integrity. Industry insiders began to weigh in, with some suggesting that the pressure was getting to Taylor in a way that she hadn't anticipated. There were whispers that she was losing control of her career, that the very thing that had made her so successful, her ability to stay in command of her narrative, was slipping away. As the weeks dragged on, the media continued to paint a picture of a woman who was struggling to keep her public image intact. Taylor had always been known for her composure, her ability to take control of the narrative and steer it in the direction she wanted. But now, the story seemed to be writing itself, and she was no longer the one holding the pen. Meanwhile, Adam, Sinclair's star was rising. The more he pushed Taylor's buttons, the more his career seemed to flourish. His public statements were being quoted by outlets worldwide. His social media following was growing by the day, and his name was being mentioned in the same breath as some of the biggest figures in the music industry. While Taylor was retreating into silence, Adam was capitalizing on the attention, positioning himself as a voice of truth, a man who was willing to expose the hidden realities of fame. It wasn't just Taylor's image that was being torn apart. It was also the relationships she had built over the years. As the drama played out in the media, her friendships with other celebrities began to come into question. Were they really supportive of her, or had they been just as caught up in the drama as everyone else? Some of Taylor's closest allies started to distance themselves from the controversy, either out of fear of being dragged into the mess, or because they too were starting to question her choices. And so, the divide deepened. On one side stood Taylor's loyal fans who refused to abandon her, and on the other stood the ever-growing army of those who believed she had lost control. As the lines were drawn, the world watched, waiting for someone to make the next move. Would Taylor speak out and regain her narrative, or would Adam continue to pull at the threads of her carefully constructed life? The future of Taylor Swift, and the truth about what really happened that night in New York City, seemed more uncertain than ever. As the weeks passed since the fallout between Taylor Swift and Adam Sinclair, the story of their controversial encounter continued to unfold. In the public eye, the damage that had been done to Taylor's image was still palpable, and it seemed that the more time passed, the deeper the divide between her and her fans grew. The silence that Taylor had initially chosen as her response was now seen as an almost tacit acknowledgement of the damage done. While Adam continued to capitalize on the controversy, appearing in interviews and on social media, Taylor remained conspicuously absent from the public discourse. Her decision to step back was a strategic one, no doubt, but it didn't appear to be bringing her the relief that she had hoped for. Rather than fading away from the limelight, the silence surrounding Taylor seemed to amplify the questions that fans and critics alike had been asking. Was Taylor in control of her career, or was she losing grip on the very narrative she had spent years crafting? Was she succumbing to the pressure, or was there something more at play behind the scenes? As time dragged on, the public began to get restless. The fans who had stood by Taylor through every high and low now felt abandoned. They had watched her grow from a teenage country singer into one of the most influential pop stars in the world. And now, in her moment of crisis, they felt as though she had turned her back on them. Some fans began to turn their support toward Adam, not necessarily because they agreed with him, but because they saw him as the one who was willing to challenge the status quo, the one who wasn't afraid to speak his truth. His candidness in interviews only added fuel to the fire, and his rise in prominence continued unabated. In stark contrast, Taylor's absence from the public eye only fueled the belief that she was retreating from the pressure. Her team continued to issue vague statements, reassuring the public that she was simply taking a break to focus on her personal life. But those explanations felt hollow to many. Fans who had followed her every move for years were accustomed to the raw, emotional lyrics and the behind-the-scenes glimpses that Taylor had once shared so freely. Now those same fans were left to wonder, where had the real Taylor gone? The music industry, too, began to take notice of the shift. Industry insiders who had once praised Taylor for her ability to dominate the charts and control the narrative now whispered behind closed doors about the cracks that had begun to show in her armor. Some even speculated that this incident with Adam Sinclair had revealed a deeper weakness, one that could affect her career in ways that no one had anticipated. Taylor Swift was no longer the untouchable figure she had once been. She was now seen as someone who was vulnerable, someone who could be chipped away at by those willing to stand in opposition. Amid the growing tensions, Adam Sinclair continued to push the boundaries of what was considered acceptable. His public comments became more pointed, more antagonistic. He didn't just speak about Taylor anymore, he went after the entire system that had enabled her rise to superstardom. Adam began to voice his opinions about the pressure that celebrities like Taylor were under, suggesting that the public's idealization of stars like her only made them more susceptible to manipulation. He painted himself as a voice of reason in a world of illusion, and in doing so, he managed to shift some of the narrative away from his initial controversy and onto a broader critique of fame itself. For a time, it seemed as though Adam was winning the battle. His influence was growing, and his name was becoming synonymous with the kind of outspoken, unfiltered honesty that was beginning to resonate with the public. In a world where so many celebrities were seen as untouchable and aloof, Adam's willingness to speak his mind made him appear more relatable to the masses. It was as though, in the midst of Taylor's silence, Adam had become the voice of the people. But as the months wore on, something began to shift. Taylor's silence, though initially viewed as a sign of weakness, started to be reinterpreted by a growing number of fans and critics as something much more strategic. There were whispers that Taylor was working behind the scenes, carefully plotting her comeback. And then, as if to confirm those rumors, Taylor emerged from her hiatus in a way that no one had expected. It wasn't with a grand announcement or a flashy new single. Instead, Taylor released a cryptic statement on social media, acknowledging the controversy without giving specifics. She thanked her fans for their unwavering support and admitted that, in the chaos of everything, she had lost sight of what truly mattered to her. The message was simple but powerful, and it resonated with a large portion of her fan base. Taylor, it seemed, was finally ready to take back control of her narrative. The public's reaction to her return was mixed. Some fans welcomed her with open arms, embracing the raw vulnerability she had displayed in her message. For them, this was the Taylor they had always loved, the one who wasn't afraid to be real, to admit when she was wrong, and to take ownership of her mistakes. To them, this was a moment of redemption, a chance for Taylor to show that she was more than just the image that had been constructed for her. She was human after all, and in admitting her vulnerability, she had gained their respect all over again. On the other hand, there were those who remained skeptical. They questioned the timing of her statement, wondering if it was just another carefully crafted PR move designed to repair her image. Had Taylor learned from the incident, or was she simply playing the game like everyone else? To these fans, the return to the public eye felt too calculated, too rehearsed. They wondered if Taylor had truly changed, or if this was just another chapter in the ongoing saga of celebrity manipulation. In the aftermath of her return, the conversation surrounding Taylor Swift began to shift once more. There was a sense of cautious optimism among her supporters, as they hoped that the woman they had once admired was ready to reclaim her throne. But there was also a lingering question. Would she be able to rebuild the trust that had been lost, or would the cracks that had appeared in her image continue to haunt her? As for Adam Sinclair, he continued to make waves in the media, though his position in the public eye seemed to be shifting as well. While he had once been seen as the challenger, the one who dared to speak out against the system, he was now facing increasing pushback from those who felt that he had crossed a line. His actions, though initially celebrated by some, began to be scrutinized in a new light. Was Adam Sinclair simply a voice for truth, or had he too become a pawn in the game of celebrity? With the media cycle moving on to the next scandal, it seemed that the drama between Taylor Swift and Adam Sinclair was slowly coming to a close. But the impact of their confrontation would be felt for a long time to come. Taylor Swift, no longer the untouchable superstar she had once been, was now a more complex figure, one who had faced public scrutiny and come out the other side stronger, though not without a few battle scars. Adam Sinclair, too, had played his part in the drama. But whether he would be able to maintain his newfound influence was uncertain. In the end, it seemed that this saga had taught both Taylor and Adam something valuable. Taylor learned the cost of silence in an era where every moment of fame is under constant scrutiny. Adam learned that the truth, no matter how bold it may seem, can be just as dangerous as it is liberating. And both of them, in their own ways, would have to come to terms with the fallout of their actions. For Taylor, the journey was far from over. She had proven that even the strongest icons could falter, and that the path to redemption was rarely a straight line. But whether she would be able to rebuild her career and her image, or whether the damage done by this incident would haunt her for years to come, remained to be seen.